Japan has the highest savings rate among major developed economies. Japanese households save 10 to 15% of their income as a baseline, compared to the American average of 3 to 5%. Japan has more people over 100 years old per capita than almost any nation on Earth. The country built one of the largest middle classes in history, with an average household income that would be considered modest by US standards. And Japan has words, multiple words, for concepts about money, time, and possession that don't have direct English equivalents. None of this is accidental. The relationship Japanese culture has with money is structurally different from Western personal finance, and understanding 9 of its core principles may change how you think about wealth, spending, and what enough actually means. Principle 1. Kakibo, the household budgeting method built on 4 honest questions. Kakibo, pronounced ka-keibo, is a Japanese household budget practice that dates to 1904, created by Japan's first female journalist, Hani Motoko. It requires no app, no software, and no complicated spreadsheet. You write by hand, in a physical notebook, at the beginning of every month. 4 questions anchor the practice. How much money do you have available this month? How much do you want to save? How much did you actually spend? And most importantly, how can you improve next month? The handwriting requirement is not arbitrary. Research on handwriting versus digital note-taking consistently shows that the physical act of writing engages deeper cognitive processing. When you write your budget by hand, you can't autofill or copy-paste your way through it. You confront each number. You feel the weight of what you're writing in a way that typing on a phone doesn't produce. A 2019 study published in the Journal of Consumer Psychology found that participants who wrote financial goals by hand achieved them at 42% higher rates than participants who typed them digitally. Same goals, same intentions, dramatically different execution rates, just from the physical act of writing. Studies on Kakibo adoptees in Japan and in Western markets where it has spread in recent years find that households report saving 30 to 40% more in the first year purely from the accountability effect of the handwritten review. Kakibo has also spread well beyond Japan. The English-language edition of Fumiko Chiba's modern adaptation of the practice sold over 1 million copies internationally after its 2018 publication, becoming one of the best-selling personal finance books in the UK before crossing into the US market. The Western adoption accelerated during the pandemic. People suddenly stuck at home with unexpected time and financial anxiety found the analog simplicity of a physical notebook more calming and concrete than spreadsheets or apps. What separates Kakebo from a standard budget is the 4th question. Most budgets are static. Here is how much I plan to spend. Here is how much I spent. Here is the gap. Kakebo's 4th question, how can I improve next month, transforms the exercise from a report into a feedback loop. You're not just tracking, you're iterating. Each month you make one specific behavioral adjustment based on what you learned the month before. Over 12 months of this, you've made 12 targeted improvements to your spending behavior, each building on the last. That compounding of behavioral adjustment over 12 months produces a fundamentally different financial person than 12 months of standard budgeting ever will. Principle 2. Ikigai and the financial case for purposeful work. Ikigai, roughly translated as reason for being, sits at the intersection of 4 elements: what you love, what you're good at, what the world needs, and what you can be paid for. Western personal finance rarely discusses this, but behavioral research makes the connection clear. People who find meaning in their primary work make significantly different financial decisions than people who feel trapped by it. People in jobs they experience as meaningful spend less on lifestyle escape, fewer expensive vacations driven by exhaustion, fewer impulse purchases driven by stress relief, less lifestyle inflation as compensation for professional unhappiness. They also tend to stay employed longer, earn more through sustained performance, and execute 20-year financial plans at much higher rates. Ikigai isn't soft philosophy. It's a practical predictor of financial behavior over decades. Principle 3. Motenai, the concept of regret over waste. Motenai is the Japanese word for the feeling of regret when something valuable is wasted. It applies to food, objects, time, and money. In Japanese households, letting something go to waste, using only part of it, discarding it before its useful life ends, buying more than you need, carries genuine emotional weight that shapes purchasing behavior at the point of decision. Americans spend approximately $1,500 per year on goods that are never used or barely used. clothing with tags still attached, kitchen appliances used twice before going to the back of a cabinet, tools purchased for a single project. Matenai culture prevents most of this spending at the source, not through rules or discipline, but through an internalized emotional response to waste. The practical implementation: before any purchase over $50, ask one honest question. Will I use this more than 10 times? Not can I imagine using it. Will I actually use it? If the honest answer is no, the Matenai impulse creates hesitation, and in most cases that hesitation is enough. The purchase doesn't happen. The money stays. Researchers at the University of Michigan have studied the psychological mechanism behind this and identified something they call completion anxiety, the specific discomfort of having paid for something you didn't fully use. It's distinct from buyer's remorse, which is regret about a purchase after the fact. Completion anxiety is the forward-facing dread of knowing, at the moment of purchase, that you probably won't use this fully. Motainai culture internalizes that feeling so deeply that it operates as a filter before purchase, not as regret after. Americans generally experience the regret version but not the preemptive version, which is why the spending pattern is harder to interrupt. Clothing is where Americans waste the most, and the numbers are genuinely striking. The average American buys approximately 68 garments per year. Research from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation and various sustainable fashion studies consistently finds that roughly 50% of an average American's wardrobe is worn fewer than 5 times before being donated, discarded, or forgotten. That means 34 garments per year, roughly half of everything purchased, is functionally wasted. At an average price of $25 per garment for mid-market clothing, that's $850 per year in clothing that was never meaningfully worn. Over a career, that single category of preventable waste represents tens of thousands of dollars. A household with 2 adults where both operate under this pattern is losing $1,700 per year to clothing that ends up in a bag for Goodwill. Madinai doesn't create rules about how many clothes you're allowed to own. It creates a feeling strong enough to make you hesitate before buying the 69th garment when you already haven't worn 20 of the 68 you already have. Principle 4. Wabi-sabi. The aesthetics of imperfection and enough. Wabi-sabi is the Japanese aesthetic philosophy that finds beauty in imperfection, impermanence, and incompleteness. The chipped ceramic bowl is beautiful. The weathered wooden bench is beautiful. The imperfect life is beautiful. In the context of money, wabi-sabi is the philosophical foundation of contentment. It contrasts fundamentally with American upgrade culture. The assumption that newer, bigger, faster, and shinier is categorically better. Behavioral economics research on hedonic adaptation is unambiguous. Upgrades produce happiness boosts that last 3 to 6 months and then fade as we adapt to the new normal. The bigger apartment becomes the baseline. The new car becomes ordinary. The vacation afterglow fades. We return to our hedonic baseline and need the next upgrade to feel the same lift again. This cycle is financially expensive and psychologically exhausting. Wabi-sabi households don't feel deprived. They feel free. This is the distinction that most Western financial advice misses. Contentment isn't about having less. It's about a different relationship with what you already have. Principle 5. The Kakibo envelope method for guilt-free deliberate spending. Japanese household budgeting pairs with physical cash envelope allocation. Once the monthly budget is written in the Kakibo notebook, spending money is divided into physical or mental envelopes: groceries, dining out, transportation, entertainment, personal care. When the envelope is empty, the category is finished for the month. The psychological mechanism is the reverse of how most people budget. Instead of tracking spending throughout the month and feeling guilty when you overspend a category, you give yourself permission in advance. The money in the envelope is yours to spend completely, without guilt or tracking. The discipline happens at the beginning of the month when you decide how much goes in each envelope, not every time you buy a coffee. This preserves willpower for the decisions that matter while creating automatic constraint for the ones that don't. Principle 6. Multi-generational time horizons built into financial decisions. Japan has companies that have operated continuously for over 1,000 years. Kongo Gumi, a construction company founded in 578 AD, is widely considered the world's oldest still operating business. This cultural relationship with multi-generational time stretches into how Japanese households think about money. Saving is not primarily for personal retirement. It's for the household, for children's education, for family stability, for contributing to a financial foundation that extends beyond the individual. American personal finance is almost entirely individualistic. Your retirement, your goals, your returns. Japanese money culture asks what financial foundation is being built and for whom beyond yourself. This longer time horizon produces dramatically different behaviors: less consumer debt, more conservative investing, higher home ownership rates, and a reluctance to liquidate assets for short-term consumption that might otherwise be tempting. Principle 7. Gaiman. Dignified endurance of financial discomfort. Gaiman is the practice of persevering through hardship with patience and dignity, without complaint. In financial terms, it manifests as the capacity to tolerate the phase of wealth building that looks, from the outside, like falling behind. This is the phase where your friends are upgrading to nicer apartments and you're not. Where you're driving the same car for the 8th year, while people around you are leasing new ones. Where your investment account balance feels embarrassingly small relative to your peers' visible lifestyle. Gaiman is not masochism. It's the dignified recognition that the short-term discomfort of deliberate below-means living produces something the spending crowd won't have in 20 years. Western financial advice talks about delayed gratification as a tactic. Gaiman treats it as a virtue, a form of strength that deserves internal respect. The person practicing Gaiman doesn't feel like they're missing out. They feel like they're doing the hard, important work that most people can't sustain. That psychological reframe matters enormously for long-term financial behavior. Principle 8. Minimalism as financial strategy, not aesthetic. Japanese minimalism, deeply rooted in Zen philosophy and shaped by generations of limited physical space, produces a direct financial benefit that has nothing to do with owning fewer things for its own sake. Fewer possessions mean lower housing costs, lower insurance costs, lower maintenance costs, less time spent managing and maintaining, and a natural resistance to impulse accumulation. Research on household wealth accumulation consistently shows that minimalism correlates with higher savings rates, not because minimalists earn less or deprive themselves, but because they've genuinely decoupled their sense of well-being from ownership. The minimalist doesn't experience a smaller home as a sacrifice. They experience a simpler life as a choice they like. That psychological difference translates directly into spending patterns. Principle 9. Money is flowing energy, not personal identity. Japanese culture, shaped by Buddhist philosophy, treats money as something that flows through life, to be managed with care, used purposefully, neither accumulated with greed nor displayed conspicuously. The American relationship with money is identity-laden. Your salary reflects your worth, your spending reflects your status, your possessions communicate your place in the social hierarchy. The financial behavioral consequences of the identity-laden approach are well documented. People who tie identity to income and spending are more likely to make financially harmful decisions to preserve social signaling. Buying the more expensive car when a functional cheaper one would serve the same purpose. Moving to the premium neighborhood when the moderate one would provide the same actual life quality. They are more vulnerable to status anxiety, the feeling of falling behind when peers upgrade. Buddhist-influenced financial philosophy treats money as energy, not identity. It removes the ego from financial decisions, which paradoxically makes those decisions more rational. The question becomes, does this serve the life I want to build? Rather than, does this maintain the image I want to project? What makes these principles more powerful is that several of them are self-reinforcing when practiced together. Kakibo, Matenai, and Wabi-sabi form a particularly tight system. Kakibo forces financial awareness. You write down what you spent. You see the patterns. You can't rationalize away the numbers on the page. Matenai creates hesitation at the point of purchase, before the money leaves your account. Wabi-sabi removes the emotional need that drives the purchase in the first place by genuinely rewiring your relationship with what you already own. When all three are active simultaneously, discretionary spending drops naturally, not through white-knuckle discipline at the register, but because the desire to buy unnecessarily weakens at its source. The need to spend doesn't arise as urgently. The hesitation at purchase filters what does arise, and the Kakibo review makes visible whatever got through anyway. It's a three-layer system. Individually, each principle produces modest change. Together, they produce something closer to a different financial identity. These 9 principles aren't a lecture about Japanese culture being superior to American culture. They're frameworks, some of the most rigorously tested frameworks in behavioral finance, many of which happen to have Japanese names because Japan developed them most consciously. Pick one or two that resonate and start there. The one that feels most foreign to how you were raised to think about money is probably the one most worth exploring. Which of these 9 hits closest to home for you? Tell me in the comments. Which one feels most foreign to how you think about money, and which one do you already practice without knowing it had a name? Subscribe. Next week, we're running the actual math on real estate versus dividend stocks, and the numbers might genuinely surprise you.